G'day guys and gal, your parents are a key part of your life. Mummy and daddy issues are very real and very crippling afflictions. I mean, I don't hate that daddy issues exist because it probably scored me about 70% of the blowjobs that I've ever received, but I still can't help but feel bad for the poor girls. Primarchs and young women have a lot in common. They are both prone to severe mood swings, irrational thoughts, and genocide on a galactic scale, all as a result of daddy issues. But the Emperor wasn't the Primarch's only parental figure. If he was, then things probably would have been really bad. Most of the Primarchs were raised by adoptive parents or guardians. Some were shitty and abusive, while some were extremely wholesome and kind. If we look at which Primarchs turned to chaos and which Primarchs remained loyal, 9 out of 10 times, the loyalists had good parental figures and the traitors had a shit upbringing. Did you know that buying and painting a Majorkill mini increases your load size by 20%? True story. Each Majorkill mini is printed with love, and an 8K Elegoo Saturn II, which goes hard, oh my god. Link in the description if you want to check that out, best 3D printer I've ever used. We have big ass dreadnought sized shark daddies, space Spartans with various helmet and weapon variants, a space elf deathlord with some solid girth, and a whole lot more than that. There will be another painting competition coming up, so now's a great time to buy, paint, and be ready for when that gets announced. All prices are in Australian, so you're already getting a massive discount alongside some of the cheapest international shipping on the planet. Today we'll go over each of the Primarch's adoptive parents and guardians, detailing how they treated them and why that made them the man-children that they are today. We'll also look at what became of each Primarch parent. Let's get into it. The Lion had a bit of a rough childhood. He crash-landed in a forest full of giant chaos-corrupted monsters that he had to kill with his bare hands, so it's pretty impressive how quickly he adjusted when he was found and adopted by Luther, a techno-knight lord on the planet. Luther heavily shaped the Lion and his attitude, teaching him nobility and knighthood, as well as how to actually speak after a decade of punching chaos monsters. It's very impressive that Luther was able to keep up with the Lion, remaining as his mentor and older brother figure for quite some time. I say older brother figure because the Lion is too, the Lion to actually have a father who isn't the God Emperor of mankind. The Lion and Luther were a god tier team, uniting their world and purging it of the monsters on it. Luther was so impressive that it was said if it wasn't for the arrival of the Lion, Luther would have been the greatest hero the planet had ever seen. This is part of the reason why Luther eventually fell to chaos out of jealousy. Luther would become a demi, too old for the full process, and join the Lion on his crusade across the stars, eventually being banished back to Caliban for almost letting a nuke kill the Lion. From here, his jealousy and rage festered, allowing him to become a Chaos Nexus with the power to beat the Lion in a duel and put him in a coma. Luther was then taken prisoner by the Dark Angels and has remained on the rock for 10,000 years, only recently escaping. The entire time in prison, he's repented his sins, begged the Lion for forgiveness, and vows to fight alongside him once again one day. So yeah, not sure if him being freed is good or bad for the Imperium. Primarch II's dad was Caitlyn Jenner. This explains why he was killed and his memory banished from history. When Fulgrim landed on Chemos, he was discovered by the poor mining workers who were able to successfully petition for his survival, as orphans were usually killed instead. The planet was fucked, a mining world with next to no natural resources. As such, everyone had to work all the time to prepare the basic necessities for survival. Whilst Fulgrim did have a parental figure, there wasn't much time for bonding and cutesies. Fulgrim literally became the daddy of the planet, upgrading all their technology, reclaiming lost settlements, and saving them from inevitable doom. He turned Chemos from a shithole dying world to a trade center, producing surpluses of everything. His primary motive was so people could start studying useless art degrees again. Motherfucker loves art. But in terms of parents, his only real daddy was the Emperor. When the Big E arrived, he started crying and instantly became clingy and weird. I can't recall a single mention of his adoptive parents after he met the Emperor. Perturabo, on the other hand, had a complex and kinda toxic relationship with his adoptive family. Perty didn't land in the Imperial Palace on his adoptive world of Olympia. He landed somewhere remote, figured out how to do shit by himself, and then wandered the land as a mercenary and artisan. Eventually some guards found him and brought him to the lord of the local city of Lokos. The Lord adopted him pretty quickly after seeing how much of a beast he was, and the two struck a bargain. Perty would be completely loyal to the Lord, and in return, the Lord would protect him and give him access to all the training and knowledge that was physically available. Despite Perty quickly outgrowing his father, whom he never really loved, he remained true to their pact, leading his armies and conquering all the neighbouring cities and lands. He invented hectic shit, like a trebuchet that could throw AIDS, as well as a vibrator that could double as a gladius. When the Emperor came, Perty was happy to leave his family and join in on all the adventures the galaxy had to offer. However, when his adoptive father eventually died, Olympia rebelled against the Imperium, which is a huge sore spot for Perty, and was actually the catalyst for him joining Horus, so there you go. Jaghatai was discovered by Angron, the chieftain of a small tribe on his planet of Chagoris. His adoptive father saw Jaghatai as a gift from the heavens, a child of destiny who would one day conquer the world. If this was Game of Thrones, he would be the stallion that mounts the world. Unfortunately, Jaghatai's father was killed by a rival tribe, which Jaghatai avenged in spectacular style. He straight up went full Anakin, killing every single man, woman and child of the rival clan. He was then like, wow, that was fucked up. Let's try and end this on a planetary scale. Hence he conquered all the tribes and eventually the world. Even though his father wasn't around for long, his death and legacy shaped Jaghatai's actions. If he hadn't been killed and instead lived peacefully, it could have been decades or more until Jaghatai kicked into gear, likely not even conquering his world before the Emperor found him. Mr. Russ had a interesting parental figure growing up. The mad lad was literally found and raised by a pack of wolves for the first part of his life, which does go a long way to explain the Space Wolves' retarded naming conventions. He was eventually found by a pack of hunters who killed his wolf mother and most of his wolf siblings. Toddler Russ was able to kill a dozen of them before eventually the hunters were like, what the fuck, everyone settle down. Russ saved 2 of his wolf siblings and went with the hunters. Leman was taken to the king of the Russ tribe, who decided that having a Primarch adoptive son would be pretty cool, definitely a similar upbringing to the lion. Russ quickly became number 1, becoming the smartest and strongest human in the tribe in no time at all. From there, Russ goes all Thor on Ferrus, winning thousands of battles, slaying giant mythical creatures, and doing his best to try and brew beer that could actually make a Primarch drunk. When his father naturally passed, Leman took the throne, with the entire world swearing fealty to him. As a result of having mostly well-adjusted parental figures, including Wolf Mama, Russ maintained a pretty level head and enjoyed a mutually respectful relationship with the Emperor. Rogal Dorn had a pretty wholesome guardian despite a very unwholesome world. Rogal would be adopted by a noble family, the House of Dorn, who would teach him everything you need to know about sandcastles, trenches, and pissing off Perturabo. He saw the patriarch of the family as his grandfather, and he held him in incredibly high regard, even after discovering they weren't blood related. He respects his memory so much that whenever he sleeps, he cuddles up with his grandfather's fur robe for comfort. I'm not kidding, that's exactly what he does. With such a well-adjusted, wholesome upbringing, Dorn quickly took command of the local star system and became the emperor of his own mini-kingdom. By the time the true emperor arrived, he was very impressed. A lot of that success can be attributed to Dorn's grandfather. On the other hand, Konrad had a fucking abysmal upbringing, literally crash landing into his planet's crust and having to claw his way out of magma as a baby. He then had to hide from all the murderers and rapists on his homeworld until he was old enough to start hunting them. The entire time he was never adopted, hence was one of the only true Primarch orphans. And it shows. The dude was a nutcase with very twisted morals. It's often said that if Konrad was adopted by a kind mother who taught him empathy and how to use justice for good, he could have become a benevolent space Batman, instead of the deranged fucker we got. Sanguinius was one of those Primarchs, like Fulgrim, that landed on a desperate world that didn't have the balls to act like his parents. He was raised by a tribe of noble and good people, or at least as noble and good as one can get on a radiation cesspit desert full of mutants. Whilst he was cared for and taught how to be human by the tribe's people, he was a literal angel that could fly, hence he naturally became his people's leader and guardian after a few short years. Once again, there could be no one else except the literal emperor of mankind who could claim fathership of Sanguinius. If Leman was Thor, Ferrus was Hercules. Choosing to be an orphan, Ferrus wandered the lands of Medusa, defeating mythical creatures, destroying mountains, and bench pressing 4 plates. He even killed a Necron construct, which may have been a Catan shard or some kind of extremely advanced Necron. When he melted it, the necrodermis from its body bonded with his hands to give him his iconic look. But yeah, no one raised Ferrus except Ferrus. He was like a god to the people of Medusa, so when the Emperor arrived, the two had an anime tier brawl before Ferrus accepted him as his father. Primarch 11's parents were Bill Cosby and George Pell. No wonder why people chose to forget about him. Angron had a fucking shit upbringing in regards to parents. The men who took him to the arena did nothing to raise him, and he instead came under the care of a veteran gladiator that taught him about honor in combat. Angron was eventually ordered to kill his own father, and upon refusal, they stuck nails in his brain, causing him to go on a rampage and kill his adoptive father anyway. I can kinda see why Angron was so fucked up now. As such, he lived out the rest of his life as a bitter, angry man, and not just because of the brain nails. Guilliman, on the other hand, probably had one of the best and cleanest upbringings out of everyone, with his adoptive mother living well into the Horus heresy. Guilliman literally had a mum who he saw as a mum even when the Emperor found him. Before all that though, G-Man was found and adopted by Konrad, a nobleman of Macragge. As G-Man claimed one of his greatest victories, he returned home to find a coup in motion that killed his father. As Konrad was a pious and intelligent man who was forcing the corrupt aristocrats to take care of their people, he became a target. With his father's death and betrayal, Guilliman went rage mode, which is something he does here and there if you know a bit about the Big Blue Boy, slaughtering the corrupt traitorous aristocrats and taking command of Macragge. However, Tarisha Uton, G-Man's mother, would survive and be his #1 advisor. She would call him boy and even tell him off if he was being a bit naughty. As G-Man was considered the greatest threat to the traitors during the heresy, they continually tried to assassinate her. Konrad gave it a shot, and she actually stood up to him and called him a little orphan Batman wannabe bitch. She was saved by Vulkan, then later on her ship was targeted, and as far as I'm aware, it's unknown if she survived. I would say yes, because bad bitches don't go down easily. It's usually said that Guilliman's extremely well-adjusted upbringing is why he's considered one of the most level-headed, impactful Primarchs in the entire setting. Morty got the short end of the stick with parents. He was found and adopted by an evil psychic necromancer overlord, which wasn't the best dad. He would leave Morty locked in a fortress that was in a toxic zone of the planet, so Morty was low-key fucking dying 24/7. Eventually Morty escaped and became the guardian of the humans living in the valley, killing the evil necro overlords one by one until only his adoptive father remained. By the time the Emperor arrived, Morty had not yet killed his adoptive father, as he couldn't reach the highest peak where he was located. The Emperor called him a bitch and dared him to try, which Morty did and failed, nearly dying before the Emperor saved his life and killed his adoptive dad. You would think that Morty would be grateful, however he saw it as a kill steal and was eternally resentful towards the Emperor for it. Magnus's home planet was extremely convenient and tailored towards him. It was a planet of enlightened sorcerers who embraced them instantly despite the fact that he was red. His primary teacher and caretaker was Amon. Amon was a wise father, warning Magnus against delving too deeply into the warp in search of knowledge. When the Emperor arrived and the Thousand Suns became a thing, Amon became an Astartes and Magnus's greatest advisor, acting as the devil's advocate who would regularly try to disagree with Magnus in order for Magnus to truly consider his actions. When Prospero fell, Amon was one of the few Thousand Suns to survive, and one of the even fewer to not get turned to dust during the rubric of Ahriman. Amon would seek ways to try bring his dusty brothers back to life, eventually bringing him into conflict with Ahriman, a conflict that would kill Amon. By the time of his death, he and Magnus weren't really father and son. Magnus wasn't even really Magnus. Overall though, he was a good mentor, however Magnus's arrogance with the warp was just too much for him. Horus was discovered very early on in the Great Crusade, hence didn't have time to mature or form meaningful bonds on his home planet. As such, he saw the Emperor as his one and only father, which, didn't pan out so well. Lorgar had a shitty dad, a religious zealot called Corvus that abused and probably molested Lorgar as a child. One such abuse was so bad that the people traveling with Lorgar and Corvus tried to kill the abusive freak, but Lorgar killed them and saved his father due to his twisted perception of loyalty and love. Corvus would follow Lorgar as a demi Astartes during the Great Crusade, remaining amongst his chief advisors, although Lorgar had shed him as a father in favour of the Emperor. Despite this, he would still listen to Cor, and as such was corrupted by chaos due to the advisory of Erebus and Mr. Ferion. So overall, a shit dad who still lives in the setting to this day. Vulkan was adopted by a humble blacksmith who taught him how to work the forge and just be a dude. Vulkan wasn't overly ambitious, and he happily tended and excelled in his craft for a couple years. It was only when a bunch of Dark Elder raiders attacked and Vulkan had to solo kill 100 of them did people go holy fucking shit and declare him as their leader, swearing to stand up for themselves against the space elf rapists. It was soon after this that the Emperor arrived, with him and Vulkan having a dick measuring contest. Vulkan won because obvious reasons. This all occurred within like 5 years of Vulkan's arrival, so he didn't have time to form a super meaningful bond with his adoptive family. In saying that though, Vulkan is the kindest and most human out of all the Primarchs, which I'm sure his humble beginnings helped to reinforce. Corvus was raised by the miners on his slave world who helped hide him from the oppressive overlords. Due to the desperation of their plight, he was more like their messiah and secret weapon rather than a son. This continues the trend of whenever desperate people find a Primarch, they don't adopt him or see them as their child. Instead, they quickly make them their leader. They were good people though, so it wasn't like he was abused or fucked with. By them being slaves, it actually made Corvus very anti-oppression, which is always a good thing. Alpharius was actually the only Primarch to not be sent away, hence was directly raised by the Emperor and Malcador, mostly Malcador though. Omegon on the other hand got raised and experimented on by Xenos, which sucks pretty hard. Honestly, that could be the worst upbringing out of all of them, but he ended up being more well adjusted than Alpharius, so hey, maybe Xeno Daddy is the way to go, or maybe the Emperor just fucking sucks. So doing a quick head count, we can see that Guilliman, Rogal, Leman, Magnus, Jaghatai and Vulkan had good parental figures, Ferrus, Sanguinius, the Lion, Corvus, Leman, Fulgrim and Perti had okay upbringings, and Lorgar, Konrad, Mortarion, Angron and Omegon got shit upbringings. I don't really know how to class Horus and Alpharius, as getting raised by the Emperor is both a terrible and great thing. I mean, they both went traitors, so yeah. The point is, a good upbringing is the greatest shield against the machinations of chaos. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. For only $1 per month to give you access to a boatload of Battle Mace 40 million nudie pics. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more parental content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.